Derek Shaw was standing at the front of the conference room, presenting Clara Webb's event design as his own. And Clara Webb was 3 minutes late, and slightly out of breath, and walking through the door in time to watch every second of it. She had been downstairs in the copy room, making prints of the floor plan that Derek had told her he did not need. He had needed them. She had known he would need them, because she had built every line of that floor plan herself over 3 late evenings, and had understood from the beginning that no one could walk into that client meeting and answer detailed questions about a layout they had never personally measured, without a physical reference in front of them. So she had made the copies anyway, and she had been making them when the meeting started, and now she was 3 minutes late, and she was walking through the door, and Derek Shaw was at the front of the room pointing at her work, with a laser pen, and saying "we." She found the only open seat near the back wall, set her notebook and her already cold coffee on the table, and arranged her face into the kind of calm that takes years of daily practice to produce, without any visible effort. On the projection screen behind Derek was the full Verano Palace event design. The floor plan, the lighting grid, the catering rotation chart, divided by time and station, the traffic flow diagram she had color-coded by corridor width, the 15-minute block timeline she had built and then rebuilt until every gap was accounted for and every handoff was protected. Every number, every line, every small note in the margins had come from her evenings, her kitchen table, her careful and repeated reading of the facilities report that Derek Shaw had received by email 9 days ago and had never opened. He was pointing at it with the red laser dot and speaking in the first-person plural, as though the plural referred to himself and some other version of himself who had also stayed up doing the work. We restructured the entry corridor flow to create a split approach at the 2 main access points, he said, moving the dot across the plan. Clara had redrawn 3 separate times before the spacing worked correctly. We relocated the bar service from the center position to the north alcove, based on our traffic analysis of the corridor widths, at peak guest movement. Clara pressed her thumbnail hard into the spine of her notebook and held it there. Across the long table, Lily Harper caught her eye for exactly 1 second. Lily was 26, the only other junior coordinator on the Hartwell team who consistently paid attention to what was actually happening in the rooms around her, and she had the rare talent of communicating entire paragraphs with the movement of a single eyebrow. The message right now was completely clear. She saw it. She was sorry. And there was nothing either of them could do about it in this room, in front of these clients, at this particular moment, without consequences that neither of them could currently afford. Clara looked back at the projection screen. At the far end of the table sat the 3 clients. 2 were men in dark suits who had offered their names at the beginning of the meeting and not asked a single substantive question since. The third was a woman named Caroline West, who served as project representative for the Verano Palace's new ownership group. Caroline had introduced herself in the brief, quiet way of someone who had been sitting in conference rooms like this one for many years and had long since stopped needing to announce her own authority. She was listening to everything, and Clara could tell, in the specific way you can tell when someone like Caroline West is actually listening, that she was listening to the things that were not being said as carefully as the things that were. Derek moved through the slides. He was a practiced presenter, comfortable at the front of a room, fluent in the language of confidence, even when it was not underpinned by actual knowledge. The gaps only appeared when the questions came, and the questions came. One of the suited men asked about the electrical load requirements for the planned chandelier sequence. Derek paused a half-second too long, and then said the hotel's existing electrical infrastructure was more than adequate for the planned configuration. Clara wrote in her notebook without looking up, "Confirm electrician schedule directly. Do not route through Derek." Because she had read the facilities report twice and had flagged on both readings that the East Wing circuit board needed a temporary bypass installed for 3 of the overhead chandelier chains before the event. She had arranged for a licensed electrician to be on site 2 days before the gala and had confirmed the appointment by phone that morning. Derek did not know any of this, because the facilities briefing she had compiled and sent him 9 days ago had been automatically moved to his archive folder without being opened. She made her note and turned the page and waited. Then Caroline West looked down the full length of the conference table and looked directly at Clara. Not at Derek, not at the screen, at Clara specifically, with the level directness of someone who had already formed a preliminary read of the room and wanted to confirm it. The transition timing between the cocktail reception and the seated dinner, Caroline said. Her voice was even and precise. You have built in 45 minutes between the two. I would like to understand the specific reasoning behind that number. Derek opened his mouth. Clara was already speaking. The Verano kitchen runs a 7-minute plate-out cycle for any seated guest count above 300, she said. She had been living inside these numbers for 6 weeks. She could have recited them in her sleep. The cocktail reception is in the West Gallery. The gallery connects to the ballroom through the South Corridor. If guests begin entering the ballroom before the kitchen has completed the first course setup, service breaks down in the opening 20 minutes, and the timing never fully recovers for the rest of the evening. The 45-minute window is tight, but it gives the kitchen its complete preparation cycle and allows guests to move from the gallery to the ballroom at a natural pace, without requiring anyone to be directed or hurried. The room was quiet. It was the specific quiet that settles after a precise answer to a precise question, the quiet of a gap being exactly filled. Caroline West held her gaze on Clara for a long moment. Then she wrote something on the notepad in front of her, pressed the pen once, and said, "Good." Derek said nothing. The meeting closed with handshakes and business cards and the careful, surface-warm words that end meetings like this one. Clara was almost at the conference room door when Derek materialized at her shoulder. "Next time a client asks a technical question, you let me field it first," he said. Low voice, controlled, the warning dressed in the clothing of a management note. "She was asking about the kitchen timing," Clara said. "I built that timeline. And I presented this project," Derek said. "There is a communication structure here. Respect it." She looked at him for one measured moment. Derek Shaw was 41, always well turned out, and had built his career on a single specific skill, placing himself visibly above the work of capable people before anyone in the room thought to look past him. He did not do it with cruelty. He did it the way certain things do what they do, automatically, efficiently, and without any apparent awareness that it could be otherwise. "Of course," Clara said, and walked back to her desk. Lily was there before Clara had finished sitting down. She set a genuinely hot cup of coffee on the desk and pulled up the spare chair. "You answered that question better than anyone else in that room could have," Lily said quietly. "Derek will read the facilities report tonight," Clara said, "now that he knows the kind of thing they ask. That is not how any of this should work." "No," Clara agreed. "But that is how it works here, and I know it, and so do you, and so does everyone in this office who pays attention, and none of that changes what needs doing." Lily gave her the expression she reserved for situations she disagreed with, but respected Clara enough not to argue her out of. Then her voice shifted. "The on-site setup," Lily said. "They are going to give that to you." Clara allowed herself, for one full and honest moment, to feel it. "I think so," she said. She turned back to her screen. Clara Webb had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city, in a neighborhood where stability was something you worked toward, rather than started with. Her mother, Ruth, had worked the press machines at a dry cleaning shop 6 days a week, for as long as Clara could remember. Ruth was a small, practical woman, with a steady manner, and the specific, hard-won quality of someone who carried a full and difficult life, without making it look like the heaviest thing she owned. She had given 2 things to her daughter, with more consistency and clarity than any classroom later managed: that work done properly was worth the effort it cost, and that no one was going to arrive and change your circumstances for you, so you had better develop the skill and habit of managing your own. Clara's father had been gone since she was 9. She had stopped wondering about it by 12. There were more useful ways to spend the thinking. She had put herself through a degree in event management at night school, while working full-time at the front desk of a mid-range hotel, where she spent 3 years learning everything she could about how a building ran from the inside of it. She watched events unfold from behind the desk during night shifts, and gradually built a specific understanding of what made the difference between an event that technically succeeded and one that genuinely worked. She had graduated, taken her first coordinator role, moved companies twice, as her skills outgrew the rooms she was in, and arrived at Hartwell Event Solutions 8 months ago. She was 24 years old, and she was genuinely excellent at what she did. She was also the kind of person that a room full of people looked through rather than at, not because there was anything missing, but because she had spent so long moving with quiet efficiency in other people's backgrounds that the rooms had stopped expecting her to step forward. Her last relationship had ended 11 months ago. His name was Paul Grant, He worked in finance, and had always considered himself someone who understood how the world actually functioned beneath the polite surface of things. On the last night they shared a room, he had told her, gently, that she was not the type that things happen for. He meant she was too quiet, too contained, too at ease with operating in the background of other people's lives. He said it carefully, as though careful made it something other than a verdict. She had not argued. She had gone home, made tea, looked at the ceiling of her small kitchen for a while, and the following morning had gone into the office and untangled a vendor scheduling crisis that had been compounding for 2 weeks, and had it resolved before noon, without anyone asking her to. That was Clara. She did not wait for the right door to open. She found the service entrance, learned the access code, and had the room arranged correctly before the guests arrived. 3 days after the client meeting, Derek called her to his office. His chair was set marginally higher than the guest chair, as it always was. The Verano folder was open on his desk. The client representative has specifically requested you as on-site lead for the setup days, he said. Days 1, 2, and 3. I will manage event night and all client communications. Inside her chest, something that was not quite excitement and not quite calm, but was the exact sensation of being given the work you were made for, had settled quietly into place. I will be there at 6:30, she said. Keep it professional, Derek said. High visibility. Do not draw unnecessary attention to yourself. She nodded and walked out. Lily was beside her desk before Clara had sat down. On-site lead, Lily said. 3 days inside the Verano. 3 days, Clara confirmed. Lily's face went genuinely warm. You have been studying photographs of that building for 6 weeks. Photographs are a different thing, Clara said. She packed her sight bag that evening. Measuring tape, camera, toolkit. Her annotated copy of the facilities report, fully tabbed, 2 notebooks, flat shoes for long days on hard floors, a flask for coffee, a spare charger. She went through the bag twice, set it by the front door, and stood in the kitchen looking at it. She thought about the compass rose inlaid in the parquet floor, the hand-cut crystal chandeliers in 4 tiers, the gold plasterwork on the walls that had taken 3 Italian craftsmen 8 months to complete, the stage with its 2 salvaged columns. She had never stood in that room. She was going to stand in it in 3 days. Paul Grant's voice passed through briefly, the way cold air comes in under a gap. Not the kind of person things happen for. She looked at the bag. She looked at the alarm set on her phone for 5:45. She turned off the kitchen light. She had been the person who built things while other people put their names on them for long enough that she had stopped needing the name. What she had never stopped needing was the work itself, the room, the thing that was hers before it became anyone else's. And in 3 days, the most carefully studied floor plan she had ever worked from was going to be a real room under her feet. She did not know, settling into sleep, that the building she was heading toward was already drawing someone else toward it. Someone she had not yet met, who would arrive without announcement, and whose presence would quietly and permanently change the arrangement of the life she had built with such precision and such care. She only knew the bag was packed. Clara Webb slept. The Verano Palace Hotel received its first visitor at 6:22 in the morning, when Clara Webb climbed the wide front steps and found the main entrance held open by a man named George Arden. George had been the building's head of security for 23 years, through the final decade of the Verano's operation, and through all 11 years of its silence. He had kept his post through the legal disputes, the failed acquisition attempts, the long years when no one came, and the chandeliers hung dark, and the parquet floor went undanced on, and the whole building simply waited, because George Arden understood that a building like this one did not stop being important simply because it had temporarily stopped receiving people. He was somewhere in his mid-60s, a solidly built man with a calm face and the specific, settled manner of someone who had long ago finished with pretense and had since been living very comfortably without it. He examined Clara's identification badge with careful attention. He looked at her face. He handed the badge back. On-site lead, he said. Clara Webb, she confirmed. I sent the access request Wednesday morning. I received it. He held the door. You are the first one here. I know, she said. I wanted to be. She stepped inside. The lobby stopped her for 3 full seconds. She had studied photographs of the Verano for 6 weeks. She had the floor plans memorized to the centimeter. She had calculated ceiling heights from the 1924 architectural drawings and cross-referenced them against the original construction records. She had done all of this and thought it would make her ready. The lobby ceiling rose 40 feet above her head. The east-facing windows were tall and narrow, framed in pale stone, and the early morning light was coming through them in long pale strips that fell across the marble floor, in shapes that shifted very slowly as the sun continued to rise. The wide central staircase rose from the lobby's center and branched at the first landing into 2 wings. The reception desk was still covered in a protective cloth, but the plaster columns, the ceiling molding, the arched openings into the east and west corridors, all of it was intact and clean, and waiting with the patience of something that had been built well and had never stopped knowing it. The building smelled of carefully maintained old stone and the specific smell of rooms that have been properly looked after through long periods of emptiness. It was not a sad smell. It was the smell of patience. George appeared at her shoulder. "You want to see the Grand," he said. "First I need the East Wing corridor," she said. "I need to confirm the cable routing before the electrical team arrives at 7. He looked at her with a different quality of attention than he had given her at the door. Then he led her without another word. The corridor was precisely as the schematics showed. Wide, barrel-vaulted, ceiling clearance high enough for cable runs without specialist rigging. Clara walked its full length with her measuring tape and her annotated diagram, checking every junction point, confirming the bypass pathway, testing each anchor position. She found one junction that needed a repositioned bracket and added it to the morning task list. Then George led her up the main staircase. She heard the ballroom before she saw it. Not a sound, because the building was perfectly quiet, but in the way the air changed as they walked the upper corridor toward the double doors at its far end. A slight drop in temperature, a shift in the acoustic quality of the space, as though the area ahead was large enough to have developed its own atmosphere. George pressed both hands to the carved wood panels and pushed the ballroom doors inward. The grand ballroom of the Verano Palace opened before her. She stood in the doorway without moving for 3 full seconds. The parquet floor stretched across 3,000 square feet in the compass rose pattern she had memorized from the drawings, 6-pointed, with 8 concentric rings in alternating walnut and maple, the wood aged and darkened but not warped, not cracked, still geometrically true after a century on that floor. The morning light from the tall west-facing windows was falling across the parquet at a low angle, and the wood caught it and held it in a way that no photograph had ever captured. A warmth in the grain, a depth in the shadow of the inlay, that made the compass rose look like something you could feel under your feet before you had taken a step toward it. The chandeliers hung dark above her in 4 tiers. The photographs had given her no preparation for their actual scale. The largest, at the center of the room, occupied the full center of her visual field when she looked up at it directly. Each chandelier was built from hand-cut crystal, in a design that was at once architectural and alive, precise in its structure, but each piece catching even the dim morning light differently from the piece beside it, so the whole thing had a quality of movement, even when it was perfectly still. They looked like very large, very patient versions of the moment water decides to fall upward. The walls were gold, not painted, but the original relief plasterwork applied in 1924, covering every panel from floor to ceiling cornice, not a single section cracked or missing, the delicate geometric and floral patterns still precise and complete, as if the 11 years of the building's silence had simply been a pause in something that had not yet finished. At the north end, the stage, 2 columns framing it, salvaged from the demolished Arden Opera House in 1922, still standing after a century. A small bronze plaque near the service entrance commemorated a pianist who had performed here in 1938, the last significant public performance before the building closed. The room smelled of still air and old wood and something else, the compound, irreplaceable smell of a space that has been genuinely important to a great many people across a long time, and that has not entirely released that importance in the years of its silence. "She has held together," George said, and in his voice was the quiet pride of someone who has been responsible for something precious for a long time and has done the job well. "She has," Clara agreed, and meant it from the part of herself that had been preparing for this room for weeks. Then she opened her notebook and began. The facilities crew arrived at 7, 8 people, 2 licensed electricians, a staging team of 4 from the rental company, and 2 general crew from the venue's own facilities team. Clara had their task sheets organized by priority and distributed within 5 minutes of their arrival. She walked each group to their starting area and handed each group lead her direct number with instructions to call, rather than message if any question arose. 3 problems appeared before 10 o'clock. The staging company had delivered a performance platform that measured 11 inches narrow on its east side, not immediately visible from the audience floor, but genuinely dangerous for the performer's setup space. Clara identified this on her own independent measurement before the crew began securing the piece. She called the operations manager at the staging company's head office directly, not the site supervisor, who had no authority to authorize a replacement, gave him the precise discrepancy in writing by text while speaking to him, the exact specification required, and the time window within which it needed to be delivered. She told him, in a completely calm and entirely clear tone, that the current piece would not be installed and that after the time window she was offering, the conversation would move from logistics coordination to contract compliance. The correct piece was confirmed for delivery the following morning. The floral delivery arrived with centerpieces designed for 12-inch table height, while the tables in the ballroom were 18-inch banquet rounds from the venue's stock, not the 12-inch cocktail rounds she had specified in the layout document submitted 3 weeks prior. She called both the floral design coordinator and the furniture rental company within the same 20-minute window, redirected both, and had written confirmation from each that the corrected tables would be in place and the arrangements adjusted before the following morning. The 2 electricians had a substantive disagreement about the location of the correct junction point for the circuit bypass. Clara sat with both of them at the junction, went through the wiring diagram section by section, identified precisely where the 2 readings had diverged, confirmed the correct interpretation against the original electrical specification documents she had brought in her bag, and had both electricians in full agreement on the correct approach before any physical connection was touched. None of these were emergencies. They were the ordinary texture of a complex setup week. Clara moved through each one with the steadiness of someone who had been catching things early, for long enough that it felt like work rather than crisis management. By 6 in the evening, the replacement platform was confirmed in writing, the correct tables were en route, and the lighting rig was 70% installed with the bypass junction properly identified and prepared for the following day. George appeared with 2 cups of tea from a flask he had apparently been carrying all day. "You have done this before," he said. It was a high compliment from a man who gave them rarely. "A few times," she said. Day 2 moved with the particular steadiness of a setup week that has survived its first day intact. The build progressed across the whole ballroom simultaneously. Clara worked alongside the crew rather than above them, lending her hands when the work required it, climbing a ladder herself to check a chandelier anchor point, measuring and remeasuring every critical dimension. She ate standing over a supply crate at 1:15 and answered emails between bites. At 2 o'clock, the electricians ran the first full test of the chandelier sequence, all 4 tiers simultaneously, the first time in 11 years these chandeliers had been lit. Clara stood in the ballroom doorway and watched. The crystal broke the white light of the test sequence into patterns that moved across the gold walls as the chandeliers swayed, almost imperceptibly in the air current from the ventilation system. The parquet floor picked up those patterns and scattered them again in a second layer. The whole room was full of shifting, layered light that looked exactly as that 1930s newspaper had described, and also like nothing any description could quite reach, because it was not a static thing, and no description of a static thing could contain it. She called Lily. "How does it look?" Lily asked. "I genuinely do not have words for it," Clara said. She was still in the doorway. She did not move from the doorway for a while. The crew left at 6:30. George completed his sweep. He told Clara the alarm was set for 9:30 on the side entrance, same as before, and went. She was alone in the verano. She walked through it without the checklist, not because there was nothing to check, but because she wanted to know the building the way you need to know a space before you bring an event into it, where the sound changed between corridors, where the floor had a slight rise near the east wing door, how the evening light moved differently through the gallery windows than the morning light. She wanted the building to be familiar to her before 500 strangers arrived to fill it. She saved the ballroom for last. She walked in at 8:52. The chandeliers were off for the night. The corner work lamps gave the room a gentled, quieter version of itself. The tables were covered, The stage was set. The bar alcove framing was in place. She walked the full perimeter, checked each chandelier cable, tested the microphone stand position near the stage center, confirmed the floor markers for the table placement team coming in the morning. Everything was correct. She stood in the center of the compass rose for a moment. The room was ready. Tomorrow night, it would be full. She stood in the quiet of it and breathed. Outside on Alderton Lane, a car slowed and stopped at 9:04. Not at the main entrance, but at the narrow side entrance used by the building's own maintenance team, and tonight, by a man who had made a decision 40 minutes earlier and had not unmade it in the time since. Nathan Voss stepped onto the pavement of Alderton Lane, told his driver to go home for the night, and looked at the side wall of the Verano Palace Hotel. He had owned this building for 3 months. He had not yet walked inside it. This was not typical for him. He visited his properties. He walked the floors personally, formed his own sense of a space, and built his understanding from what he actually observed, rather than from what other people told him. But the Verano acquisition had been complicated, even by the standards of Voss Holdings' more complex deals. Years of legal process, multiple competing claims, the completion running in parallel with 3 other major projects. The building then immediately handed to the event planning team, while the permanent management structure was still being assembled. There had been no moment in 3 months when Nathan had found himself with the time, and the reason, and the simple inclination to come. Tonight, for a reason he did not examine very long, or very carefully, he had come. He entered his access code at the side keypad. Owen Brooks had added him to the building's security system the previous week, and stepped inside. The lobby received him. He stood in it for a moment. He had been inside important buildings before, grander by certain measures and more famous by others, and he had a calibrated sense of what a well-made historic interior felt like versus what a merely impressive one felt like. The Verano felt different from both. It felt like a place that had been genuinely important to a great many people across a very long time, and that had retained that quality in the years of its silence, the way that certain materials retain heat, not by holding on but simply by being what they were made of. He turned toward the main staircase and climbed. He pushed through the double doors at the top. He walked the corridor. He placed both hands flat against the carved wood of the ballroom doors and pushed them inward. Inside the grand ballroom, in the precise center of the parquet floor, on the center point of the compass rose, a woman stood with her clipboard under her arm, looking up at the dark chandeliers. Nathan Voss stopped in the doorway and did not move or make any sound. She had not heard him. She was completely still, her head tilted back at a slight angle, looking up at the dark crystal forms of the chandeliers in the low, warm light of the corner work lamps. Her expression was not the professional assessment of someone working through a checklist. It was something considerably harder to manufacture, the genuine, unguarded face of a person standing inside something they have been looking forward to for a long time, and who is in no hurry whatsoever to finish receiving it. He watched her. She turned, after a long moment, and began walking the room's perimeter in a slow and methodical circuit, making small notes on her clipboard as she went. She checked each chandelier cable with one hand while writing with the other. She moved with the specific calm efficiency of someone who has thought through every step before taking it, and she was going to complete the circuit and exit through the side corridor door, without ever looking in the direction of the main entrance arch where Nathan was standing. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He took one quiet step backward into the shadow of the entrance arch. She passed through the side corridor exit at the east end of the ballroom. The door swung quietly shut. Nathan Voss stood alone in the entrance arch for a long time, looking at the room she had left. He did not know her name. He knew only that she had been standing in the center of the most important room in his newest building at 9 o'clock in the evening, looking up at the dark chandeliers with an expression of completely unperformed wonder, and that she had been alone in the room, and had had no idea she was not. He walked, slowly, to the center of the ballroom floor, and stood on the compass rose, and looked up at the same dark chandeliers. They looked back at him, in the dim light, without giving him anything he had not already brought in with him. He left through the side entrance. In the car on the way home, he sat without speaking, and did not read the messages waiting on his phone, until he was already inside. The third setup day began at 6:20, when Clara walked through the Verano's side entrance in the pre-dawn quiet, and found George at his station, with a thermos of coffee, and the security log open on his desk. Replacement platform arrived at 5:45, he said, without looking up. I signed for it. It is in the service corridor. Thank you, George, she said. She took a cup from the thermos he pushed toward her and went to check the platform before the crew arrived. She measured all 4 dimensions herself before it went anywhere near the stage. It was correct. She made her notes and moved on. The day was the fullest of the 3. Every crew member present, every task running simultaneously, the whole ballroom in active preparation from 7 in the morning. Clara oversaw all of it, with the particular quality of attention she brought to the last day of a complex setup. Not the heightened alertness of crisis management, but the steady, complete presence of someone who has prepared thoroughly and is now simply executing what they built. At 2 o'clock she ran the chandelier sequence again. The room did what she had planned for it to do, and it also did something more than she had planned, and the something more was the light moving through the crystal in the layered, living way that no fixed description had ever fully reached, and she stood under it for a moment, without writing anything in her notebook. George brought tea at 4. You are finished, he said. The room is ready. The room is ready, she confirmed. The crew finished at 4:30. The venue's own team arrived at 5 for overnight preparation. Clara handed the space over formally, signed the transition documents, and told herself to go home. She did not go home. She sat on the bottom stair of the main staircase in the lobby and answered the last of her emails. She called Lily and gave her the end-of-day summary. She ate the food she had brought in her bag and drank the last cold inch of coffee from her flask. She looked at her phone and saw it was 8:47, and the building was quiet, and she was still inside it, and she did not get up. George came at 9 to confirm the alarm arrangement. Same as the previous evenings, he said. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has been watching over something precious for 23 years, and knows the difference between a person who has somewhere to be and a person who needs a few more minutes. He went to make his rounds. Clara went back to the ballroom. The chandeliers were in their overnight setting, off, with only the low corner lamps on, and the room in that light was a quieter, more private version of its full self. The table setup was partially complete. The stage was done. The bar alcove was finished. The room was ready for tomorrow night, in every practical sense, and in every sense that mattered. She walked to the center of the floor, and stood on the compass rose. No clipboard, no earpiece, no vendor to call, no checklist to finish, just flat shoes and plain work clothes, and a phone in her jacket pocket, and the room around her. She took the phone out. She put the left earphone in, just the one, the right ear open to the building around her, an old habit she had never lost, and scrolled to a song she had not thought about in years. It was not a particularly celebrated song. It was not something most people she knew would have recognized. It was a song she had discovered at 19, during a night shift at the hotel front desk, studying for an exam she was sitting the following morning, with no certainty of passing, and it had come through the small radio on the desk at around 2 in the morning, and for its full 3 minutes and 42 seconds, she had felt, for no reason she could then or ever afterward fully articulate, that everything was going to be fine. Not in the naive sense. In the deeper sense, whatever goes wrong, you will still be standing. She pressed play. The song started. She was not going to dance. She was going to stand in the center of the room she had spent months building, and listen to the song, and then go home and sleep before the biggest event she had ever constructed opened its doors at 7 the following evening. That was her plan. The melody lifted at the bridge around 40 seconds in, and Clara Webb moved. Not deliberately. Not for any audience real or imagined. Not in any way she ever permitted herself to move in any room where another person might be present. She moved the way a person moves when they are in absolute certainty of their own solitude, with every part of herself freely committed, arms going out and away from her body, weight shifting loosely from foot to foot on the polished parquet, turning in a slow and imprecise circle on the center of the compass rose. She was not dancing well, not with grace or training or precision. She was dancing the way people dance when they are not dancing for anyone, which is the only way that is entirely real. She mouthed the words she remembered. She turned another slow circle. She closed her eyes briefly and then opened them. She laughed once, quietly, to herself, at the absurdity and the completeness of standing here, in this room, in flat shoes and plain work clothes, at 10 minutes before 9 in the evening, dancing alone in the most beautiful ballroom in the city, on the night before she gave it back to the world. She did not hear the side entrance on Alderton Lane open at 8:49. She did not hear the footsteps crossing the lobby marble with the careful quietness of someone who was not trying to make noise. She did not hear the E-staff staircase, or the careful movement through the mezzanine access door at the top, or the deliberate attention taken not to disturb the lighting rig along the mezzanine rail. She heard only the song. Nathan Voss had been fully decided, the previous evening, that he was not returning to the Verano. He had sat in the apartment that was technically his home, and functionally more like a very well-maintained place to sleep between the next two places he needed to be, and he had worked until 9:30, and then stopped working, and looked at the city through the tall windows, and been unable to settle. A specific, persistent image had remained with him since the previous evening. A woman standing alone in the center of a dark ballroom, looking up at chandeliers she found genuinely extraordinary, and he could not find a satisfactory way to stop returning to it. He had told his driver the Verano at 8:43 the following evening. He told himself he was completing the walkthrough he had not managed to finish. He entered through the side door on Alderton Lane. He crossed the lobby. He took the E-staff staircase to the mezzanine level, the half-level walkway along the upper east wall of the grand ballroom, used for lighting rigs and overhead equipment, approximately 30 feet above the parquet floor. He had seen it noted in the architectural brief, and wanted to see what the room looked like from above. He came through the mezzanine access door and moved carefully along the rail to a clear sightline into the room below. He looked down. Clara Webb was dancing in the center of the ballroom floor. Nathan Voss went completely still. She was dancing with the entirety of herself present and committed and unmanaged. One earphone in, her lips forming the words of a song he could not hear. Turning slowly on the compass rose in felt, genuine, imprecise circles. Her face turned slightly upward, eyes open, with an expression that was not happiness exactly, and not relief exactly, but was what happens when a person who has been holding something very carefully for a long time, puts it down for a moment, and breathes. He stood at the mezzanine rail, and did not move. He had walked into many rooms in his life. He had learned to read them quickly and clearly, and without sentimentality. He was not a man who was easily affected by things. He had cultivated that. It was useful. In every room, every decision, every situation requiring clear sight, it served him. Looking down at the woman dancing alone in the empty ballroom in the low warm light of the corner lamps, with the dark chandeliers overhead, and the compass rose beneath her feet, and no awareness whatsoever of being seen, Nathan found that the cultivation was not, at this particular moment, particularly available to him. She completed 2 more slow turns. She mouthed what appeared to be the final verse of the song. Then the song ended and she went still, and stood with her eyes closed for a long moment, and laughed, very quietly, to herself and to no one in the world. Nathan held his position. She opened her eyes. She removed the earphone and tucked it in her pocket. She smoothed the front of her jacket with both hands. She crossed to the stage edge and picked up the clipboard she had set there before the song started. She ran one hand slowly along the surface of the replacement stage platform as she lifted the clipboard, the specific gesture of a person checking the quality of work they have already confirmed, and simply cannot resist confirming one more time. Then she looked out across the empty room, at the set stage and the draped tables, and the finished bar alcove, and the dark chandeliers, and everything she had built and arranged and corrected over 3 days, and the expression on her face was the simplest and most complete one available to a person at that precise moment. Done. And good. She walked to the side corridor exit and left. Nathan stood at the mezzanine rail for a long time after the door closed. Then he came down from the mezzanine slowly, crossed the parquet to the center of the compass rose, and stood where she had been standing. He looked up at the dark chandeliers and the low lamplight. He stood there for a while, in the specific quality of quiet that belongs to a large empty room, in which something has just happened. He took his phone from his coat pocket. He typed, "The on-site setup coordinator for the Verano. I need her full name tonight if possible." He sent it to Owen Brooks and walked out through the side entrance. In the car, he did not read the 3 messages already waiting on his phone until he was inside the apartment. Owen had replied in 11 minutes. Clara Webb, Junior Event Coordinator, Hartwell Event Solutions, on-site lead for days 1, 2, and 3. Nathan read the message. He put the phone down. He picked it up and read the message again. He put it down and went to bed and lay awake for longer than he usually did. Owen Brooks arrived at the Voss Holdings building at 7:47, 43 minutes before Nathan, which was the standard arrangement. Owen was 29 and had worked for Nathan for 4 years. He was meticulous in the way that people are when they genuinely enjoy precision rather than merely endure it. He had learned to read Nathan's attention the way a navigator learns a difficult stretch of water, by sustained observation, pattern recognition, and the corrections that followed the inaccurate readings. When Nathan came through the door at 8:17 and asked, before putting his bag down, whether Owen had found the full file on the Hartwell coordinator, Owen said yes. Clara Webb, he said. 24. 8 months with Hartwell. Before that, 2 other event management firms and 3 years in front-of-house hotel management, event management degree through night school at the City College. Her line manager on the Verano contract is Derek Shaw, listed as project lead. Shaw has not been present on site at any point during the 3-day setup. Nathan had not yet sat down. He was standing in the center of his office with his coat still on, his attention at the point past Owen's right shoulder where it went, when he was working through something that was not on any scheduled agenda. Pull her complete employee file from the Hartwell vendor documentation, Nathan said. We have access through the property management contract. Owen noted this. Nathan reviewed vendor personnel files when there was a performance concern, or a contract compliance issue. He had never requested one without a stated operational reason. Owen filed this in the section of his mental catalog marked, Things I Observe, without commenting on, a section that had been growing somewhat over the past week. Any specific concern? Owen asked. No, Nathan said. Just the file. He sat down. Owen pulled the file. Contact details, employment history, the standard Hartwell coordinator profile, educational background, previous employers, role history, no photograph. Nathan read the file once. He set it down. He read it again. The board meeting started at 9. 5 people around the table. 3 agenda items. A completion review for the Aldwick commercial development, a site assessment for the potential Eastern Quarter acquisition, and the first quarter financial summary from the property management division. Nathan was present for the full 2 hours. He asked the appropriate questions at the appropriate moments. He authorized 2 decisions and deferred one pending a second legal opinion. Anyone in the room would have described him as fully engaged. He was not fully present for all of it, and he was aware of this. The image that returned was not the dance, the loose, private joy of the turning circle on the parquet floor, the expression of complete aliveness. The image that returned was the first evening, the ballroom doors opening and the woman standing in the center of the room, looking up at the dark chandeliers with an expression that was not produced for any audience and was not in any way managed, the expression of a person taking in something they found genuinely extraordinary, with no layer between themselves and the thing. Such a small thing to notice. It stayed with him regardless. He signed the quarterly review at 10:53 and let the room clear ahead of him. Owen appeared at the door at exactly the right moment. The Hartwell file is on your desk, Owen said. I saw it. A brief pause. Anything for the afternoon? Owen asked. 2 things, Nathan said. Find out whether Hartwell has any other active contracts with Voss Properties, and the gala tomorrow. I was on the original invitation list and then deferred when the Frankfurt review conflicted. That is correct, Owen said. Put me back on, Nathan said. Confirm the table. Owen confirmed it on his tablet before he reached the door. He did not ask why Nathan had changed his mind. He had worked for Nathan for 4 years, and he knew the difference between decisions that benefited from being asked about and decisions that did not. This one clearly did not. In the Hartwell office, on the morning after the final Verano setup day, Clara Webb was at her desk by 8:18, with her event day run sheet in front of her, and the growing awareness that Derek had spent part of the previous afternoon on the phone with the Verano building manager, asking questions that were already answered in the run sheet Derek had been holding since Monday. Lily arrived at 8:41. Derek called the venue yesterday afternoon, Lily said. I know, Clara said. The building manager emailed me this morning as a courtesy, to let me know that everything Derek asked about had already been covered in the documentation he received. The corner of Lily's mouth moved toward an expression she completed about 2/3 of the way, and then left at that. You are in a peculiar position, she said. I am in a familiar position, Clara said. It ends tomorrow night. And then? Clara looked at her screen. Contract renewal in 6 weeks. No indication either way. She had not asked, because asking would project uncertainty she could not afford. And then the next thing, she said. She spent the morning reviewing the event day run sheet. 19 pages, every vendor arrival window, every staff rotation point, every guest flow checkpoint, every catering timing note and stage queue. She had built it over 2 weeks of evenings, and updated it every time anything changed. It was the document she was most certain about in all of the project. She was also almost certain she would not be at the front of any room when someone praised it. She was completely at peace with that, in a way she had spent a long time making true. At 4 o'clock, Lily leaned across from her desk. Clara. Yes. You have eaten something today. Clara thought honestly about this. Coffee at 6:45. Half a granola bar sometime around 9:30. She could not confirm a full meal. In a general sense, she said. Lily placed a granola bar on her desk and went to refill her coffee, without another word on the subject. Clara ate it. She left the office at 5:48, took the bus home, made dinner, reviewed the run sheet one final time, and was in bed before 10:30. She slept deeply and completely, the way you sleep when the work is done, and there is nothing left to improve. In the high room at the top of the Voss Holdings building, Nathan sat with the facilities summary, and the Hartwell file, and the city spread below, until Owen came at 9:20 to say the car was ready. The gala is confirmed for 7 tomorrow, Owen said. Your table is in the 3rd row from the east wall. You are listed as a standard attendee, not as host or client principal. Good, Nathan said. He left. Nathan sat alone in the room a while longer, looking at the city. He was going to the gala because it was his building, and it was the appropriate thing to do. He was also going because a woman named Clara Webb was going to be running the event floor, and he had read her complete employment file twice in the past 12 hours, and something he could not yet name kept pulling him back toward a room he had already visited twice without announcing himself. He turned off the desk lamp and went to bed. He did not sleep as easily as Clara Webb did that night. The Verano Palace Hotel opened its main entrance doors for the first time in 11 years, at exactly 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and Clara Webb had been inside the building for 3 hours before the first guest arrived. She had been there since 4 in the afternoon, walking every inch of the guest-facing areas from the main entrance through the lobby, up the staircase, through the gallery, and into the grand ballroom, checking every detail against the run sheet and confirming with each vendor team in sequence that their setup was correct and complete. She found 2 small items needing adjustment, one check-in desk position 4 inches out from the wall marker, one refrigeration unit 2 feet forward of its station creating a foot traffic interruption, and had both corrected before 4:45. She was wearing dark trousers, a dark green blouse, and the flat shoes that had carried her through 3 setup days and were, she had decided, the right shoes for this night. Her radio earpiece was in on the venue channel. Her run sheet was in her jacket pocket. Her phone had 8 vendor group threads open, and she had sent check-in messages to all 8 before the kitchen's final delivery truck finished unloading. Derek Shaw arrived at 5:27 in a very good jacket. He did a brief walk of the grand ballroom, stood under the chandeliers with his hands in his pockets, in the manner of someone approving work they had specified, and asked Clara 3 questions about the evening timeline, all answered in specific detail in the run sheet he was holding and had not read. She answered each question and moved to the next task. By 6:50, the kitchen had final confirmation. The chandelier opening sequence was tested and confirmed twice. All check-in positions were staffed. The bar team was in position. The stage was sound-checked to specification, and the lighting technician had confirmed cues 1 through 4. The doors opened at 7. 500 guests across 45 minutes, precisely the rate the dual entry plan had been built to handle. The check-in pace moved correctly. The staff managed the dual desk system without bottlenecks. Guests moved toward the gallery reception at a natural pace, with no compression in the corridors. Clara watched the building receive them. The Verano had been built for exactly this, for people in its corridors, voices in its lobby, the energy of a large gathering moving through a well-made space. It received 500 people on its first night back, with the ease of something that had not forgotten how this was done. The ceiling heights absorbed the crowd noise without sending it back as echo. The wide staircase moved people upward without compression. The gallery held the cocktail reception easily. When the ballroom doors opened at 7:42 and the chandelier sequence came to its full display, the response was a collective sound, an involuntary thing, what 500 people make when they encounter something that genuinely surprises them with its beauty. Clara heard it from 20 feet away in the east corridor. She kept her face professional and looked at her run sheet. The first issue arrived at 7:58. The head sommelier had not received the revised wine list the clients had updated 3 weeks prior. Clara had the email chain with written confirmation of receipt pulled up on her phone before he finished explaining. She showed him the revised list, walked through the 6 substitutions, and sent him back to the floor. 4 minutes. No visible disruption to any guest. At 8:41, a guest with a documented hearing sensitivity had been seated adjacent to the stage. Clara identified 2 appropriate mid-room seats, confirmed the swap with both seated guests, and had the hearing-sensitive guest relocated before the first course began. 11 minutes, invisible to the room. At 9:13, a lighting cue error sent the stage lights to full intensity during the dinner service. Clara radioed the control booth before 5 seconds had passed. The correct cue was restored in under 30 seconds. None of these moments registered as events from the perspective of anyone attending the gala. None of them registered from the perspective of Derek Shaw, who was at the client table with Caroline West and the ownership representatives, presenting himself as the architect of everything currently working correctly around them. Clara was not at the client table. She was in the kitchen corridor, the east lobby, the stage side passage, the north alcove, the check-in desk area, and a dozen other positions in rotation through the evening, reading the event the way a very experienced professional reads one, not at its visible surface, which was beautiful and working correctly, but at the level of its underlying structure, the weight-bearing points where the evening's success was resting, and which no guest would ever need to be aware of. The structure held. By 9:45, the dessert service was on schedule. The bar was managing its peak volume correctly. The stage quartet was at the precise sound level Clara had specified, and the room was doing what a well-run event in a well-made building does, holding 500 people in an atmosphere that felt both extraordinary and entirely effortless. It is always a lie, and always exactly the right lie to tell. Clara was in the east entrance arch, completing her final active phase check, when someone stepped backward out of the crowd, near the north bar, and stopped directly in her path. She was already mid-turn, committed to the movement taking her toward the north alcove service entrance, and she walked almost directly into him. Her left hand, holding the run sheet and her pen, made contact with his right arm. The pen went sideways, the paper folded wrong, and the glass he was holding, a tall glass of water, the only thing he had been carrying all evening, tipped forward, and deposited approximately a third of its contents onto the left shoulder of his jacket. "I am so sorry," she said immediately, already pivoting toward the nearest service station. "Please let me. There is club soda at the stage wing bar. I can radio ahead." "It is fine," he said. She turned back. She had pressed white service napkins from the station shelf and was holding one out before she had fully focused on his face. "The stage wing bar is just through that passage," she said, already beginning to turn. "I can have someone." "You do not need to fix this," he said. There was something in the quality of how he said it, not dismissive, not impatient, genuinely different from either, that made her stop moving and look at him properly. He was tall, dark hair, worn without much attention, a face that was difficult to categorize quickly but straightforward to look at, a quality of focus in it, a stillness that was not blank but entirely unperformed. He was watching her with the quiet beginnings of something that was not quite amusement but was adjacent to it. She looked at the wet patch on his jacket shoulder. "You will survive," she said, and handed him the napkin regardless. She was already turning back to the room. "I generally do," he said behind her, and there was something in his voice she noted and filed, and did not have time to return to. She completed the final items on the active list across the next 22 minutes. Dessert service transition confirmed. Bar team end of service briefing sent. Overnight security arrangements confirmed with the building manager. She took a call from Lily in the East Service corridor at 10:47. "The event has gone well," Clara said. "I need you to hear something directly from me," Lily said. "You built that event. Every decision, every timing call, every correction, you." "I know," Clara said. "I need you to feel it, not just know it. I feel it, Clara said, and she did. Quietly, genuinely, in the part of herself where things were true before they became anything she said to anyone. The event was done, and it had worked, and she had built it, and it had worked. Derek found her in the corridor at 11:10. Caroline West expressed satisfaction with the event, he said. His tone was its usual careful neutral. Good, Clara said. He looked at her with something she had not seen on his face before in quite that specific arrangement, something between acknowledgement and recalibration, the expression of a man adjusting his understanding of a situation in a way he had not anticipated needing to. He went back into the ballroom. The close took until 12:23. The final guests departed. The venue team moved into breakdown. The overnight security handover was completed. Clara signed the event close form. She was sitting on a supply crate in the kitchen service corridor at 12:29, finishing the last line of the run sheet by the light of her phone, when footsteps came around the corner. The man whose jacket she had soaked appeared, the jacket now over his arm, and stopped when he saw her. He was not particularly surprised. Still here, he said. Last item on the close list, she said, holding up the sheet. He looked at the stack of paperwork beside her, the earpiece still in, the flat shoes, the pen behind her ear. You were running the event floor tonight, he said. Not a question. I was part of the team, she said. That is a very careful answer. She looked at him more directly. He was leaning against the corridor wall in the relaxed, undemonstrative way of someone who was comfortable in whatever space they happened to be in. What is your name? He asked. Clara Webb, she said. Nathan, he said. Just the first name, without title or elaboration. She nodded. She had a run sheet to finish. She looked back at it. It was a very well-run event, he said. I will pass that on to the team, she said. Good night, Clara Webb, he said. Good night, she said, without looking up. She heard him cross back toward the lobby. She heard his footsteps on the marble, receding. She finished the last item on the run sheet. She put the pen down. She sat in the quiet kitchen corridor of the Verano Palace Hotel and breathed. The event was done, and it had worked, and she had built it, and it had worked, and it was done. She gave herself 45 seconds of it. Then she picked up her bag and went home. The call came at 9:22 on a Monday morning, 5 days after the gala, while Clara was working through the final vendor invoices. Ruth Pinner, from the Hartwell Contracts team. A contract extension offer would arrive before the end of the week. Thank you for letting me know, Clara said. She sat for one full, honest moment. Then she picked up her pen and went back to the invoices. Lily arrived in 12 minutes. Clara, it is 3 new projects, all Voss Holdings properties, the Kelber Hotel, the Aldwych Commercial Event Suite, and the Fenwick Gallery Commission. That is not a routine extension. That is a specifically selected bundle of contracts from a specific client, requested as a group within 1 week of the gala. Who directed the package? Clara asked. The contracts file reads client directed, Lily said. They looked at each other. Derek is point of contact on all 3, Lily said. You are listed as on-site coordinator across all 3. Same structure as Verano. Larger events, Clara said. Yes, Lily said. 3 of them, together. Within a week. Clara looked at her screen. The Kelber, boutique hotel, strong kitchen, timing management challenges. The Aldwych, high-traffic corporate events, logistics volume. The Fenwick Gallery, artistic curatorial requirements, donor relations. Together they were more significant responsibility than she had held in any single period of her working life. She put the feeling away and went back to the invoices. The first unusual thing happened 4 days later. The coordinator cluster near the kitchen, and the propped fire door. Too cold in winter, too warm in summer. The background condition of 8 months at Hartwell was being relocated. The building facilities manager appeared on a Friday afternoon. The corner office bay on the north side. 2 shared rooms, independent climate control, natural light, vacant for 8 weeks, and now assigned to the coordinator team by building management. Was this requested from outside the building? Clara asked. Building management decision, supported by HR, he said carefully. She looked at Lily after he left. Lily said nothing. The quality of her silence was a very detailed statement. The second thing happened Tuesday of the following week. A sealed envelope on Clara's newly relocated desk. No sender name. Inside, a hotel gift card for a quality property, and a small note card with 4 handwritten words. For exceptional work on Verano, and no signature. Clara held the note card. She went to Derek's office. He had not sent it. He suggested she flag it with accounts. She went back to her desk. She thought about the desk relocation, the 3-project contract package, the sealed envelope with no name. She thought about a man in a kitchen corridor who had declined her offer of club soda and said the event was very well done. She put all of it behind a door in her mind and closed it. Lily was not closing any doors. Clara, Lily said. Do not, Clara said. Someone at the level of the client group is paying careful, deliberate, and clearly resourced attention to you, Lily said, at a pace that indicated she had decided to complete the sentence regardless of what Clara said. The desk relocation, the 3-event contract bundle, the envelope with no identifying name. Clara, these are not coincidences. We have no confirmed connection between any of those things, Clara said. Clara. I have a preliminary brief to build for the Kelber event, and I am already 2 days behind on the initial timeline I set for it, Clara said. I need to work. Lily made a sound that communicated her full range of feelings, while technically being not quite words, and went back to her screen. Clara built the Kelber brief. 4 hours on the layout, the catering structure and its timing framework, the specific buffering strategy for the known starter to main gap. She sent it to Derek at 4:22, and went back to the Verano invoice log. She did not think about the gift card. She thought about it twice, and stopped herself both times. In the Voss Holdings building, Nathan sat across from Victor Crane, who was 51, and had known Nathan since they were both 23 years old, and taking risks, with no reasonable right to pay off as well as they had. You are distracted, Victor said. They were reviewing projections for the Eastern Quarter site. Not dramatically, but consistently, for approximately 2 weeks. I am present, Nathan said. You are in the room, Victor said. That is different. He removed his reading glasses. I spoke with Caroline West. She said the Verano Gala was among the most polished events she had attended in years. She also found it difficult to identify who deserved the primary credit, because the person presented as project lead was clearly not the person who had built the event. Nathan looked at the projection sheet. She said the setup coordinator knew the building in more operational detail after 3 days than the venue's own permanent team, Victor continued. She said the corrections during setup were handled so efficiently, she only discovered they had occurred after reading the building manager's report. She said, when she asked a technical question in the initial client meeting, the project lead stumbled, and the coordinator answered precisely and without hesitation. Caroline West is observant, Nathan said. She has been doing this for 25 years, Victor said. Whatever is occupying the other division of your attention, attend to it. Divided attention is not your most effective state. He said goodnight and left. Nathan sat alone in the room. Then he called Owen. The Kelber Hotel event, he said. Who is the assigned on-site coordinator from Hartwell? Owen checked. Clara Webb, he said. Schedule me a walkthrough at the Kelber for the first day of their setup, Nathan said. Owen wrote it down. He did not ask why. The Kelber Hotel walkthrough appeared in Clara's calendar the evening before the setup day. Client representative, 9 o'clock. She forwarded the briefing documents to Derek, confirmed her own arrival for 7, and did not think about the entry further. She arrived at the Kelber at 6:53. She walked the event suite, confirmed the overnight markers, met the AV technician at 8:22, and walked him through the screen placement rationale. By 9, she had her briefing notes open and ready. Derek messaged at 9:01, scheduling conflict, arriving at 10, managed the walkthrough and intro. She confirmed receipt. She heard the main entrance at 9:04. She came out of the event suite into the lobby. The man standing at the front desk turned at the sound of her footsteps. Several things happened at once in her chest. She placed him before the complete sequence finished running. The dark hair, the specific quality of stillness in how he stood, the unhurried nature of his presence in a space, the kitchen corridor of the Verano, the glass of water. You will survive. The venue manager was speaking. Miss Webb, This is Mr. Voss, from the client group, for the walkthrough. The surname arrived a full half-second after her eyes had already confirmed everything it meant. Voss, Nathan Voss, owner, Voss Holdings International, owner of the Verano Palace Hotel, owner of the Kelber Hotel, where she was currently standing, owner of the Aldwych Commercial Suite and the Fenwick Gallery, which were the other two events in her extended contract, the man whose jacket she had ruined, with approximately a third of a glass of water. His expression was composed. But something behind it was not composed at all, and she could see it clearly enough that it told her something about what he had chosen not to conceal. Mr. Voss, Clara said. Her voice was level. She was grateful. Miss Webb, he said. The way he said her name, with no performance of recognition or surprise, as though it were simply the name of the person he had expected to find, told her what she had already begun to understand. You know who I am, she said. I know who you are, he said. I should have introduced myself properly when we first met at the Verano. I am sorry that I did not. She looked at him. He met her gaze without adjustment. Yes, she said. You should have. Then she turned toward the event suite. The setup is underway. I will take you through the layout. She walked him through all of it. The table configuration, the garden transition plan, the catering station logic and its relationship to the kitchen's documented timing pattern, the AV setup, the screen offset, and why it served sightlines better than a central hang at this ceiling height. She was thorough and professional, and she did not allow any of the unsettledness moving quietly through her chest to reach her voice or her face. He listened to all of it. He did not produce the enthusiastic nodding of someone performing engagement, rather than actually processing what was being said. He asked one substantive question about the buffering built into the garden-to-dining room transition, and when she explained it, he accepted the explanation without further comment, which meant he had understood it. She finished at the garden entrance. Is there anything else you would like to see? She asked. No, he said. Thank you. That was thorough. She nodded. I would like to buy you a coffee, he said. The register was different. It was not the register of a client speaking to an event coordinator. She looked at him. I am on site, she said. Your crew is working, he said, calmly and without urgency. The AV technician has his specifications. The venue manager is present. You have completed the walkthrough. The brief your team provided was comprehensive, not pressing, simply noting, accurately, that the argument she was presenting was technically true, and practically speaking not as constraining as she was indicating. 30 minutes. She looked at the event suite. 30 minutes, she said. The cafe was 2 buildings down, small and independent, mismatched furniture, the specific unhurried quality of a place that had been the same for 20 years, and had no interest in being different. They sat in the window. Nathan ordered black coffee. Clara ordered the same, and then changed it to one with milk when she noticed she had been unconsciously mirroring him and decided not to. The Verano event, he said. You built it. I was part of the team, she said. You built it, he said again. No heat, no insistence, but no adjustment either. The facilities report, the floor plan revisions, the timing structure, the 3 corrections during setup. You built it. How do you know about the 3 corrections? She asked. Building manager's post-setup summary, he said. I went back to the original facilities briefing to understand what each one had involved. She said nothing. The person presenting the project in the initial client meeting was not the person who had built it, he said. Derek Shaw is my manager, she said. He presents the work of his team. He presented your work as though it were his own, Nathan said. She held his gaze steadily. I am not going to comment on that. You do not need to, he said. I have sat in enough rooms to know the difference between the person who organized a thing and the person who stands in front of it. Something moved across her face, small and involuntary, controlled almost immediately. Almost. Why did you want to tell me that? She asked. He was quiet for a genuine moment, not performed. Because you were in that building for 3 days making something excellent, he said. And no one said so out loud, directly to you, as a specific acknowledgement of what you had done. She looked at the cup between her hands and wrapped both hands around it. Thank you, she said. She meant it simply and completely. They talked, not about events or venues. He asked about the hotel work before Hartwell. What had drawn her from front-of-house management into events? She answered honestly, without packaging the story for effect. She told him about watching events unfold from behind the front desk during night shifts, and gradually building a specific understanding of what made the difference between an event that technically ran and one that genuinely worked. She told him the articulation had come after the understanding, not before it. He listened the way that a very small number of people listen, not waiting for the space to put his own response in, but actually receiving what she had said and sitting with it before going further. She heard herself ask something before she had consciously decided to ask it. Why did you buy the Verano? He considered it genuinely. Because it was worth considerably more than what the circumstances allowed it to be sold for, he said. The legal situation had depressed the price. Other interested parties saw a complicated acquisition. I looked at it differently. How? She asked. I saw a building that had been waiting, he said. Not a building that had been abandoned, or had lost what made it worth having. A building that was temporarily prevented from being what it was built to be. Those are different things. She looked at him. Waiting, she said. Some buildings outlast the people who built them, he said. The ones that do are almost always the ones that were built with something worth outlasting. An idea about what a building should do for the people inside it that was true enough and well made enough to survive the individuals who first had the idea. She was quiet for a moment. The compass rose on the parquet floor, she said. The plasterwork on the walls, the chandelier arrangement. Someone cared very much about what they were building. Howard Fenwick, he said. He had made money in shipping and had seen hotel interiors in European cities and wanted to bring that specific thing to this city. He had both the conviction and the resources to do it completely. That comes through, Clara said, even after 11 years of silence. You can feel what he intended when you are standing in that room. He looked at her with something very direct and very steady in his gaze. She looked at her watch. I need to get back, she said. She stood. He stood when she did and said, Thank you for the walkthrough. Thank you for the coffee, she said. She moved toward the door. Clara, he said. She turned. He was standing beside the table with his hands in his jacket pockets and an expression on his face that she gave herself 1 second to look at directly before she looked away. It was a genuinely good event, he said. She nodded once and went back to the Kelber. That evening she told Lily in the minimum number of words she could use, and still be honest. Nathan Voss, the owner, the kitchen corridor. The coffee this morning, what he had said about the event. Lily did not say I told you so. What Lily said was, Clara, you know what this is. A client who had observations about the quality of the work, Clara said. Clara. I am in the middle of a 3-event extended contract that is the most significant work opportunity I have had to date, Clara said, and I cannot afford to be distracted from it, or to compromise my professional standing in any direction. I understand that, Lily said carefully. I only want you to be honest with yourself about what actually happened this morning. What happened, Clara said, was a client walkthrough and 30 minutes of professional conversation over coffee. You came home and told me about it in the first 5 minutes, Lily said. You do not do that after client walkthroughs. Clara looked at her. Then she picked up her bag and went home. She made dinner and sat at the kitchen table with the events calendar and worked through it methodically. She thought about what he had said about the building that had been waiting. She thought about the way he listened, the specific quality of it. She thought about, I saw a building that had been waiting, not abandoned. Those are different things. She closed the calendar. She turned off the kitchen light. She was going to be professional. She was going to be focused. She was going to be excellent at the work, which was the only thing she had ever reliably been able to control. She went to bed. The Fenwick Gallery Charity Commission was on a Tuesday in November, and the building was a converted Edwardian townhouse on a quiet side street, with the specific unhurried quality of a place that had been carefully kept without being altered. Clara had spent 3 weeks on the plan, 120 guests, 5-course dinner in the main gallery, with original wildlife photography on the walls, lent by 6 photographers for the evening. Live auction in the adjoining smaller gallery following the dinner. The event had to coexist with the photography without competing with it. The dinner served the fundraising goal. The photography served the mission behind it. And getting the priority order right in the room design was the entire challenge. She arrived at 2 for final setup. By 6, the photography was lit correctly, the tables set, the kitchen team's timing confirmed, the auction items arranged in the second gallery with the bidding materials at each place. Derek arrived at 6:18, looked around, said good work, in the tone of someone confirming a weather forecast, and positioned himself near the entrance for the clients. The event ran. The auction closed at 10:32 and raised significantly more than the organization's target. The director announced the total with visible emotion. Derek left at 11:13 with a reference to an early morning and a nod toward Clara that communicated, very efficiently, that her continued presence was entirely her own decision. She confirmed the close handover with the overnight coordinator and did one final walk of both galleries. Lily called. "There is a weather warning," Lily said. "Are you still at the Fenwick?" The alert had come through at 10:27, while Clara was focused on the auction close. Outside the gallery's tall windows, the rain was driving at an angle because of the wind. She finished the gallery walk, signed the overnight form, and went to the front entrance. She opened the door. The rain was driving horizontally. The wind was strong enough that the entrance canopy was flexing visibly. She checked the transport app. South Line suspended. Road delays across all major routes. No car available within 15 minutes. She closed the door and went back inside. Alan, the venue manager, told her she was welcome to remain until conditions improved, showed her the kitchen and the security code, and departed for his own transport that was waiting outside. The building settled into its overnight quiet. Clara made tea in the kitchen and sat at the prep counter with her phone and the preliminary notes for the Aldwych brief. 40 minutes in, she heard the front entrance security pad. Footsteps in the corridor. Nathan Voss appeared in the kitchen doorway. His coat was damp at the shoulder line from the seconds between the car and the entrance. He stopped when he saw her. The expression on his face was that of a man who has found something he was not entirely unprepared to find. "Miss Webb," he said. "Mr. Voss," she said. A pause. The storm worked at the windows. "I had a post-event walkthrough scheduled," he said. "Owen booked it 6 weeks ago. I was not aware you would still be on the premises." She looked at him. He looked at her. "The storm," she said. "Yes," he said. "The storm." A moment. "The kettle has just boiled," she said. He came in and made tea from the supplies on the counter, finding what he needed, without asking where anything was. They started in the kitchen and ended in the main gallery, not by decision, but by the natural drift of a conversation that grew too important for a kitchen counter. They sat in the gallery chairs still in place from the auction, with the wildlife photographs lit softly on the walls and the storm working at the old building's bones outside, and they talked. Not about the event, not about work. He told her about his parents. His father had built a significant business and had been very focused on that fact throughout Nathan's childhood, and his mother equally absorbed. They were not unkind people. They were simply people whose primary attention was permanently and fundamentally elsewhere, and the house Nathan had grown up in had had the specific quality of a place where someone important lived but did not, in any meaningful sense, reside. He said it as a fact rather than a grievance, the tone of someone who has had enough time with something to describe it clearly without being inside the description anymore. She told him about her mother, about Ruth Webb and the pressing machines and the 6-day weeks, about the particular quality of steadiness her mother had that Clara had spent a long time trying to understand. She said she had eventually concluded it was not something you could learn as a technique. It was something you arrived at through enough hard experience, or you did not, and her mother had arrived at it, and it was the most useful thing she had ever been given. He listened to all of it. He listened the way that a very small number of people listen, where the listening itself is a complete act, rather than a waiting period between speaking. She told him about the hotel night shifts, about watching events from behind the front desk in the small hours, and building a specific understanding of the difference between an event that functioned and one that was felt. The difference was almost never visible from the outside. It was entirely in the decisions made weeks before, and the corrections made quietly in the background during the event itself, by people nobody would ever thank or notice. "Is that why you dance in empty rooms after everyone else leaves?" he said. She stopped. He was looking at the photograph on the gallery wall opposite, a large format print of a gray wolf at the edge of a birch forest in deep snow, utterly still, watching something beyond the frame, with an expression that was neither threatening nor afraid, but completely present. "The Verano," she said. "Yes," he said. "You were there," she said. "2 evenings," he said. He turned to look at her directly. "The first evening I came through the main ballroom doors, and you were in the center of the room, looking up at the chandeliers. I stepped back into the shadow of the entrance arch, and you walked out through the side corridor without seeing me." She said nothing. "The second evening I went up to the mezzanine level," he said. "I wanted to see the room from above, and then you put an earphone in and started dancing." The gallery held the sound of the rain and the wind and nothing else. "Both evenings," she said. "Both evenings," he confirmed. "Why did you not say something?" she said. He was quiet, a genuine pause. "Because what you were doing was entirely yours," he said, "and I did not want to take that from you by being seen." She looked at the wolf in the photograph. "What did you think?" she said. "Said it directly, the honest way you ask something when you want the real answer." He turned to look at her. "I thought you were the most genuinely alive person I had ever watched," he said. She sat with those words for a long time. Outside, the storm moved through the city in long, sustained gusts. The gallery lights were steady. The photographs on the walls held their subjects in their various moments of wild, unmanaged existence. "I dance when no one can see me," she said, "because it is the only thing I do for no reason." He looked at her. "Everything else I do has a function," she said. "A timeline. Something I am building or correcting or managing toward a specific outcome. Dancing alone in an empty room is the one thing I do that has no function at all." "It did not look purposeless," he said. "That is because you were watching it from the outside," she said. "From the inside, no purpose is the entire point. It is the only moment where I am not trying to do anything correctly." He said nothing. She looked at her empty teacup. "You should have told me you were there," she said. "I know," he said. "I am sorry." "Why did you not introduce yourself at the gala?" she said. He breathed once, slowly. "I was trying to find the right way to. And then you handed me a napkin, and told me I would survive, and walked back into the room before I finished finding it." Something moved in Clara's face, small, involuntary, the very beginning of something she had not yet decided whether to feel. "You own buildings I have worked in," she said. 3, he said. "You know what I mean," she said. "Yes," he said. "I do." She put her cup down and stood. "Thank you for telling me," she said, "about the Verano. Clara, I need to check whether the transport has cleared," she said. She walked to the front entrance. The main force of the wind had moved through. A car was available in 8 minutes. She stood in the entrance lobby with her jacket on, and her bag over her shoulder, and her chest full of something she was not going to name right now, in this building, with him somewhere behind her. She heard him come up behind her. "Whatever you are thinking right now," he said, "I would rather you said it to me directly than made the decision alone." She looked at the rain on the glass of the entrance door. "I am thinking," she said carefully and honestly, "that you are a client, a very significant one. I am in the middle of a 3-event contract that is determining the next phase of my professional standing. I am thinking that I cannot afford, professionally or personally, to misread something at this level." She paused. "And I am thinking that I have been told before, by someone who said it gently, as though that made it a kindness, that I am not the kind of person that things happen for. I survived that. I do not think I could survive being wrong about something like this a second time." "The rain." She heard him breathe. "I heard everything you said," he said, quietly, without argument. She did not turn around. The car arrived. She said goodnight. She went home. She went back to being professional the following morning, and the morning after that. She answered Nathan's emails within standard windows. She attended the Aldwych walkthrough with Derek, present for the whole thing this time, with her materials complete, and her attention entirely on the work. She confirmed the Kelber post-event documentation with the property manager. Reliable, competent, without a single word or gesture that stepped outside the professional register she had set. She did not think about the Fenwick Gallery, or the storm, or the wolf in the photograph, or what he had said about the most genuinely alive person he had ever watched. She thought about it every other day and stopped before the thought completed. 3 weeks after the Fenwick evening, Lily came back from lunch on a Wednesday, sat down, and held her phone out across the desk without speaking. A city lifestyle publication. Headline: Voss Holdings Air and Society. Favorite Sophie Aldridge. Photographed together at Pemberton Gala. A photograph of a formal event. Nathan in the company that his life placed him in, and beside him specifically, in the way that caption writers use the word beside when they mean something slightly more deliberate than proximity. A woman named Sophie Aldridge. Tall, composed, existing in those rooms, with the ease of someone who had grown up in them. Clara looked at the photograph for 1 second. She handed Lily's phone back. It might not mean what it looks like, Lily said carefully. He was at a gala, Clara said. He attends galas. He is specifically photographed with her, Lily said. The caption describes them as close. Every caption in that publication describes every 2 people standing within 4 feet of each other at the same event as close, Clara said. It is how the piece sells. Lily watched her. Clara. I am fine, Clara said. I know you are fine, Lily said. That is exactly what concerns me. You are so completely fine that you have already fully closed something. There was nothing to close, Clara said. He is a client. He said something personal, in an unusual circumstance, and I responded honestly, and that is the complete account of the encounter. She went back to her screen. The second thing happened 10 days later. Frances Cole had been at Hartwell for 4 years. She was careful and methodical, and had not, in 4 years, been given an independent client-facing role. She had watched the developments of Clara's recent months, the Verano lead position, the 3-contract extension, the desk relocation, the anonymous gift card, with a specific attentiveness that Clara had noticed and not responded to. On a Tuesday morning, Clara arrived at the Hartwell office to find the atmosphere of the room slightly altered in the way that happens when information has circulated among several people, and you have not yet been told about it yourself. Lily appeared from the wrong direction, and her face had the expression she wore when something had happened, and she was working out how to tell Clara. There is a conversation circulating, Lily said quietly. Frances is suggesting that the reason you received the extended contract is because you developed a personal connection with the client. She said the specific word Frances had used. Clara sat with it for a moment. She felt it in her chest. Cold, not hot. The specific cold of something unfair that cannot be disproved by simply doing the work correctly, because the implication is not about the work. She went to Derek's office and told him calmly, and without drama, what was being said, and by whom. Derek listened with the expression of a manager receiving information he would prefer not to have. I will address it with Frances, he said. Thank you, Clara said. She turned to leave. Clara, he said. She turned. The extended contract came through client direction, he said, in his careful neutral tone. I have no control over what a client group requests, and I have no reason to believe those requests were made on any basis other than demonstrated professional performance. Good, she said, because they were. She walked out. She sat at her desk and put her hands on the keyboard, and did not let anything she was feeling reach her face, in a room where other people were working. Lily brought coffee and said nothing. Clara worked through the afternoon. At 4:17, an email from Owen Brooks, confirming the logistics briefing for the final event in her current contract cycle. Professional, clear, no personal reference of any kind. She replied in the same register. She left the office at 5:44. She made dinner and sat at the kitchen table and allowed herself, alone and in private, to feel all of it. The article, the word Frances had used, the cold fact of how efficiently she had built a professional distance from something and dressed that construction as wisdom. Paul Grant's voice was in the room. Not the kind of person things happen for. She sat with her cold, clear anger at that sentence for a long time. She had always known it was not true. She had known it before he said it, during the saying of it, and every day of the 11 months since. The knowing had never been the problem. The problem was that the world had, with great consistency, treated Paul Grant like a man whose assessments were worth something, and she had been carrying that treatment around inside herself, without fully acknowledging how much space it occupied. She washed the dishes. She made tea. She sat in the quiet kitchen. She thought about the Fenwick Gallery entrance, about standing with her jacket on and her bag over her shoulder and the rain on the glass, and him behind her saying, "Whatever you are thinking, I would rather you said it directly than decided it without me." She thought about the distance she had been building. She thought about whether that distance felt like the right thing or the safe thing, and whether she had been honest with herself about the difference between those two. She finished her tea. She went to bed. In the upper floor of a building across the city that was technically his home, Nathan Voss sat in front of the tall windows and looked at the city, and did not call anyone. He had understood what she had said in the Fenwick entrance, the career calculation, the caution, the history that had shaped how she reasoned about risk. He understood all of it. He sat with his phone on the table beside him. Victor Crane had told him once that the things in life worth having were the ones that cost you the version of yourself that did not know how to be patient. He had been very good at many things. Waiting had not historically been among the strongest of them. He looked at the city. He waited anyway. The last formal item on Clara Webb's Hartwell contract was a documentation review. Not an event. Not a site visit. Just a table and a printer, and the complete written record of 3 events organized, reviewed, and filed before the contract formally closed. She finished it at 3:47 on a Friday afternoon, handed the binder to Ruth Pinner, signed the close form in 2 places, and went back to her desk. Lily was standing beside it. "They have offered renewal," Lily said, with her particular way of delivering significant news, directly, without softening, but with enough care in the tone that you knew she understood the weight of it. "I know," Clara said. "I received the email this morning. I have not decided yet." Lily looked at her. "Derek is not renewing," Lily said. "He announced it this morning, while you were in the documentation room. He has accepted a position at another firm. He leaves at the end of the month." Clara looked at her. "The senior coordinator position," Lily said carefully, "is open." Clara sat down. She had thought about this, since month 3 of Hartwell, when Derek's particular management style had become sufficiently clear. She had seen the shape of what the position could be, and what it could mean. She had thought about it, and each time had returned herself to the present work, because planning for an opportunity that might never be offered was not a productive use of the focus she needed. "When was it announced?" she asked. 9:14, Lily said, and the contracts administrator sent a note at 9:30, saying the role would be reviewed for internal candidates first. Clara was quiet. "You have built 3 events in 6 months that the client group has praised specifically, and without reservation," Lily said. "You have the site knowledge, the vendor relationships, the facilities documentation, and the track record across all 3 properties. There is no one in this office who has built what you have built in the same time frame. So when they ask, Lily," Clara said, "give me a moment." Lily went back to her desk. The afternoon moved. Clara led it. She had spent 8 months at Hartwell being the person who built things that someone else presented and named. She had done it thoroughly, without complaint and without drama, because that was what the situation required, and she was not someone who performed grievances. But she had also, if she was honest with herself in the careful, private way she had been slowly getting better at, not done it without a cost. Every event handed over to Derek's front-of-room presence had cost something, not her confidence in the work, she had never lost that, something smaller and harder to name, something about being seen. The Verano had changed something. She had stood in the center of that room, looking up at the chandeliers she had spent 6 weeks studying, and 3 days rebuilding, and she had understood, with a clarity that had nothing managed about it, that she was capable of more than the space she had been given. She picked up her bag. She had one last thing she needed to do tonight. The Verano Palace Hotel had formally transitioned to permanent management that week. Her contractual involvement with it, which had begun with a floor plan and 3 preparation days, and had somehow become the most significant work she had ever done, was officially over. She had not been back since the gala. She called George Arden. He answered on the second ring, the way he always answered. She explained what she wanted. "One last look at the ballroom," she said, before she handed the building entirely to the permanent team. He said the room was clear this evening, and the side entrance code was active until 10, and he said it in the tone of a man who understood the request perfectly, and had no reservations about honoring it. She thanked him. She took the bus. The Verano was in its quiet evening mode, The lobby lamp, the corridor sconces, the building alive in the way it had been built to be alive. George met her at the front entrance, told her he was in the basement security office if she needed anything, and left her to it without asking her to explain herself. She climbed the main staircase. She walked the corridor. She pressed both hands against the carved wood panels of the ballroom doors and pushed them inward. The grand ballroom was empty. The chandeliers were in their overnight low setting. Not the full sequence, not the winter sky effect, but present, on. The crystal catching whatever light was in the room and refracting it into something more complex than what had come in. The parquet floor was polished. The venue team had refinished it after the gala, and the compass rose had come back with a clarity of definition that no amount of maintenance during the years of silence had achieved. The inlay was precise again. The rings were distinct again. The center point was a point you could stand on and know you were standing on it. Clara walked to the center and stood on the compass rose. No clipboard, no run sheet, no earpiece, no vendor to call, no checklist to finish. She was just a woman standing in the center of a room she had spent a significant part of the past several months preparing for and then giving away, on the last night she had any claim to it. She thought about the building receiving those 500 guests on the gala night. She thought about the sound they had made when the chandelier sequence came to its full display. She thought about the way the room had received all of it, with the ease of something that had been built for exactly this, and had simply been waiting to do it again. She took her phone out. She put the left earphone in. She scrolled to the song. She pressed play. She danced. The way she always danced when she was in absolute certainty of her own solitude, with every part of herself committed and nothing managed, arms out from her sides, weight shifting freely, turning in a slow and imprecise and completely genuine circle on the compass rose. She mouthed the words she remembered. She smiled once to herself at nothing specific, and at everything at once. At the fact that this room existed, and was beautiful, and that she had been the one to bring it back to life, and that she was standing in the center of it, alone, at 17 minutes past midnight, and that this, in its own entirely pointless way, was exactly right. She was so entirely inside the song that she did not hear the side entrance on Alderton Lane open. She did not hear the footsteps on the lobby marble. She did not hear the long corridor or the slow, careful pressure of both hands against the carved wood. But she felt it. Not dramatically, not with alarm, just the particular, specific change in the quality of a room's air when another person has entered it, a change so subtle that most people would not notice, and that Clara, who had spent years paying close attention to the rooms she was in, had learned to recognize. She let the verse finish. 4 more counts on the parquet. Then she dropped her arms and took the earphone out and looked toward the main entrance arch. Nathan Voss was standing in the shadow of it. Dark coat, completely still, both hands at his sides, not performing anything, not the arrival, not the watching, simply there, looking at her, making no effort to be anywhere other than where he was. Clara Webb stood on the compass rose and looked at him across the length of the grand ballroom. The chandeliers were above her. The gold walls were all around her. The room that she had rebuilt from silence was holding them both. She had not expected him. She had also, and she was going to be honest with herself, because she was getting better at that, not entirely not expected him. "You were there again," she said. Her voice was level. "I was there again," he said. "How long?" "Long enough," he said. He was not moving toward her. He was in the entrance arch the way he had been on the other occasions, watching, not pressing, not reducing the distance between them without some participation from her. Giving her the space, giving her the choice. He had been giving her the choice since the Fenwick Gallery entrance, since the storm, since every professional email she had sent, and he had received and answered inside the precise register she had set, without a single word that stepped outside it. He had waited. She had known what the waiting cost. She had seen it in the careful, bounded quality of his replies. She had felt it in the silence on the other side of the boundary she had drawn. He had waited anyway. She looked at him across the length of the grand ballroom. She thought about Paul Grant and his careful diagnosis of her. She thought about Frances and her word for it. She thought about Derek and his chair set marginally higher, and the 17 unopened facilities reports. She thought about every room she had built while someone else stood at the front of it. She thought about Nathan on the mezzanine, staying silent because what she was doing was entirely hers, and he had not wanted to be the person who took that from her. She thought about the wolf at the forest edge in the deep snow, absolutely still, looking at something beyond the frame, neither afraid nor aggressive, simply completely present. She thought about what it cost to step out of the frame. She thought about what it cost to stay behind it for a whole life. She had been behind it for a long time. Nathan moved, the way he always moved, without urgency, without pressure, without any performance of the moment. He came away from the entrance arch and walked across the parquet floor toward her, his footsteps quiet on the polished wood, and he stopped 3 feet in front of her on the compass rose. He looked at her. He put his right hand out, open, palm upward, between them. "May I have this dance?" he said. Clara Webb looked at his open hand. She thought about the version of herself that had been living very carefully for a very long time, the version that saw every possible way a moment like this one could go wrong, and called that seeing clearly, when what it actually was fear, with a professional explanation attached to it. She had been that version of herself for long enough that she had stopped distinguishing between prudence and withholding. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She thought about the most genuinely alive person he had ever watched. She thought about the one thing she did for no reason. She thought about what it felt like to set something down, just briefly, and breathe. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers. The contact was warm and entirely real. They stood together in the center of the compass rose in the empty grand ballroom of the Verano Palace Hotel at 23 minutes past midnight. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary night without any awareness of what was happening in this room. Inside, the chandeliers cast their low light across the gold walls in the slow, layered way that no photograph had ever captured. And there was no run sheet, no timeline, no checklist, no vendor to call, no professional register to maintain. There was only the room that had been built for something worth lasting and had waited 11 years to receive it, and 2 people standing in the center of it, and a hand that had finally been taken. He moved first. A slow, unhurried turn. She moved with him. She did not dance well. As it turned out, neither did he. They danced badly, and genuinely, and without any performance of it, in the empty ballroom in the low chandelier light, and the compass rose held them both in its quiet center, and the crystal above them found the light and moved it across the gold walls in the shifting, layered pattern it had been making in this room for 100 years, and the whole building, which had been built to receive something important, and had waited 11 years to do so again, received them simply and without ceremony. Nobody was watching. For the first time in longer than Clara Webb could fully remember, that was not the point.